Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a otra edición del Seminario de Teoría Jurídica online Urbi et Orbi de la Universidad de San Andrés. Hoy tengo la suerte de presentar a otro amigo, a Luc Foisneau. En general suelo citar el ciclo del Cine Club de Salvador Samaritano y directamente dejo que hable precisamente el expositor, pero hoy voy a hacer una pequeña excepción. Voy a contar que Luc es director de investigación del célebre Centro de Investigación Científica francés, el CONICET francés, por así decir. Es director del Departamento de Estudios Políticos de la Escuela de Altos Estudios en Ciencias Sociales de París. Es profesor en la Escuela de Altos Estudios de Ciencias Sociales de París. Es miembro del Centro de Estudios Sociológicos y Políticos Raymond Aron, de la misma escuela, fue director incluso del centro, junto con, por ejemplo, Bernard Manin, Pasquale Pasquino, Filippo Urfalino, es uno de los pilares del Seminario de Filosofía Política Normativa de la Escuela de Altos Estudios. De su pasado voy a mencionar su estadía en la Maison Française, en Oxford. Luc alega que no fue ahí que adquirió ese acento oxoniense que lo caracteriza, sino que ya lo tenía de antes. Fue investigador visitante en el Departamento de Política y Relaciones Internacionales de la Universidad de Oxford, fue profesor visitante en Oxford, en la Universidad de Londres y muchas otras. Es un verdadero especialista en la historia de la filosofía moral y política modernas, siglos XVII y XVIII, una autoridad mundial en Hobbes, pero como se puede apreciar, también se dedica a la teoría moral y política contemporánea. Luc va a hablar en inglés, nos va a hacer esa gentileza, y al final de su exposición, las preguntas, por chat o en el casillero de preguntas y respuestas, pueden ser formuladas directamente en inglés si quieren, o en español y nosotros las traducimos sin mayores inconvenientes. Luc, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrés, for this invitation and also for allowing me to join your seminar. So thank you to the organizers of the seminar, to Ricardo, to Alexandra, to Nadia and Maria. And as the conditions don't allow for a direct conference and talk in front of you, I hope that the video and the connection on my side will allow this talk and discussion afterwards, to which I'm looking forward. So the theme I suggested is how not being a Kantian about moral justification. For those of you who are familiar with the work of Tim Scanlon, and notably with his major work, What We Owe to Each Other, that was published in 1998, will understand the meaning of this title. But in introduction, just to introduce, I would just say a few words. As Andrés very kindly reminded, I started my work and my research in philosophy interested by the work of Thomas Hobbes. So to a certain extent, there is an interrogation or a curiosity in the fact that I will address tonight questions in foundation of morality in a way and in a perspective that is, I can say, non-option at all. So one of my first remark is just to say that what I'm trying to do at the moment is trying to establish a connection, or just trying to think about this curious transformation in moral philosophy that happened in the 17th century with the work of Thomas Hobbes. So the question is, what happened to morality when sovereignty became the central notion or concept of political philosophy? And if I were interested, when I arrived in Oxford, were interested in the theories of justice was just because maybe I wasn't satisfied with some aspects of the moral philosophy that Thomas Hobbes developed in his reflection with the state. And so this is still my concern. How does, just to try and formulate the question in the broader way, how much did the invention of the state and our present state systems transform our perception of what morality means? So this is the general question. Here in this talk, I will let sovereignty or the question of sovereignty to the side, and I will ask myself, and I'd like to discuss on this point with you, why Tim Scanlon, who discovered moral philosophy when he discovered, I will come back to that very quickly, when he discovered the work of Kant, eventually says of his foundation of moral philosophy that is not a Kantian. So this is the concern of this talk. So the second remark is about this connection between Scanlon and Kantianism. This connection right from the beginning. I did an interview with Tim Scanlon 3 years ago, which you will find the reference to on the handout. And in this interview, I was struck by the importance of his discovery of Kant. I'm just reading very quickly what he said to me in the first quote. So you're supposed to have these handouts on your desk. And so what he said back in January of 1963, hi, Tim is speaking. I was in the basement of Blackwell's bookstore in Oxford looking at the used books to spend the book allowance that went with his fellowship. And I saw on a shelf a black book with red and white letters on the spine, which said, The Moral Law, A.J. Patton. I recognize, says Tim, this as a book I often seen in philosophy libraries, so I pulled it down to have a look. It was, of course, Kant's groundwork of the metaphysics of morals. I didn't even know at that point that Kant had written anything on moral philosophy. I thought it was something I should read, so I bought it for £1.50. You can see the precision here on the price. And this is the former student or the professor in Harvard who's talking, saying, well, £1.50 for the groundwork. This is not a lot. And he went back to his room, started reading it, and he says, which all of our students could say also, he says, I found it extremely difficult to understand, but fascinating and exciting because it seemed to offer a rigorous alternative to the preference-based views I had been reading. End of quote. So the reading of Kant, which was previously unknown to him, which says also something about his studies. He studied at Princeton. So Kant was not on the agenda. He discovers the groundwork. And this reading of Kant made him change entirely his perspective in philosophy. Prior to this reading, he was interested in philosophy of mathematics, game theory, and the like. And he decided after that to do moral philosophy. So this chance encounter with the groundwork is neither insignificant nor purely academic, but this is a decisive intellectual encounter. But the question I would like to ask myself now is why, though Kant plays this role in Scanlon's intellectual development, and though he acknowledges Kant's influence on his method in moral philosophy, Scanlon, in the end, refuses to consider himself a Kantian. So the purpose of this paper to go on and just present the few points I'd be exposing tonight. So the purpose of this paper would be to try to understand why the Scannerian foundation of morality, we will say this is justifiability to others, cannot be and is not considered by Scanlon himself as a Kantian foundation. And to answer to this query or question, or to do so, I will first try and show how Scanlon's concern with this new foundation of the morality of right and wrong is also connected with the historical context of the 1960s in the United States. And I would like to show in this first part that this is this new foundation can be characterized as a preoccupation to justify to the rest of the world and also to the North Americans themselves that has to do with the justification of the politics of the United States. So a few remarks on that. I'll be resting on a text which is quite famous in What We Owe to Each Other, and then I will try and understand some central elements of Scanlon's specific approach to morality, coming back on this idea of justifiability to others and trying to see what it means, how we can understand and make sense of it. And finally, if we have sense, if I have time enough, I would like to try and assess the difference between this Scanlonian foundation, justifiability to others, and the Kantian foundation of morality. Reading this, I realize this is maybe too much, but if it's too much, you just raise your hand and tell me to stop. So, first element, a few remarks on this new foundation of morality in its historical perspectives. This is something that is of interest to me, as Andrés said in his kind words of introduction. This is interesting since I am still an historian of philosophy to a certain extent. So I would like just to try and show how the idea of a new foundation of morality based on justifiability to others has got some connection with the political and historical situation of the United States in the 1950s and 60s. But first, a general remark about how I could just present it like that. A general remark about that would give a first indication about what could distinguish Scanlon from Kant. I would like to stress what I take as the formulation is awkward, so I apologize for it, but for what I would take to be a positive tune in Scanlon's approach to morality. Let me specify this because this is really a generality. Whereas Kant insists on the fact, for example, that respect for the moral law has to do with a sense of humiliation of our senses, that we've got this negative tone or tune associated to Kantian morality, Scanlon insists for himself on the fact that we've got to distinguish two sides of morality. This is true. There is a sense of guilt on the one hand when we are confronted with the experience of wrong actions. Either we do wrong actions or we observe wrong actions done by other people. And this dimension, this sense of guilt, connects Scanlonian morality with Kantian morals. But there is also, Scanlon insists on this, a sense of moral satisfaction, which has to do with the morality in our relations to others. So the negative aspect is presented by Scanlon as a feeling of estrangement, of having violated the requirements of a valuable relation with others. And the positive aspect is due to, I quote him, you haven't got it in your handouts, the positive value of living with others on terms that they could not reasonably reject. So there is something positive in Scanlon's approach to morality, which is that when we have those moral relationship with others, it means that we're living with them on terms that they could not reasonably reject. And of course, this not possible, the impossibility to reject, reasonably reject the principles on which others behave is crucial. I come back to that later, to the understanding of what morality is about for Scanlon. So I should like to put this agreement or absence of reasonable objection to others' behavior in a historical context. That would be my second point in this first series of remarks. And I think that putting Scanlon's morality or foundation of morality in a historical context might be helping those of you not familiar with this work, might be helping you to understand where this new foundation of morality come from. This historical perspective is, to a certain extent, the same perspective that you have in John Rawls' A Theory of Justice. There is obviously here common element, cultural element that are common to the two philosophers. And to make us understand what he means by the latter formula, I repeated the positive value of living with others on terms that they could not reasonably reject. Scanlon turns to American history and what he characterizes as a transformation of the political landscape and moral atmosphere of the States between the late 50s and early 70s. And this text is on page 163, and this is the second quote on your handouts. To put it very simply, in the 1950s, Americans considered that their institutions were justifiable or justified, maybe justified would be a better expression, in a rather unique way in the world. They considered that America had no class barriers and constituted a society in which income was earned fairly. Well, we could always discuss about this self-perception, which doesn't say anything about racial barriers in the state, of course, and we could consider that this perspective, self-justified or self-justifying perspective, is a white American perspective on the United States. I doubt that Afro-Americans in the 1950s would have shared it, but anyway, there was, says Scanlon, this kind of peaceful satisfaction and feeling of living in a justified, I would put it like that, justified institutional order. Of course, this justified institutional order and self-satisfaction, so to say, was very quickly shattered with two facts, two events, historical events, which is, of course, the civil rights movement inside the United States and outside the Vietnam War. So I'm not reading this quote because those things are well known, but the point which I would stress is the fact that in this quote, Scanlon is showing us how the idea that a behavior could be considered as right is strongly connected to the fact that it would not be possible or is not possible to reasonably object to the principles behind this behavior. So you have it here, And the Americans' reaction to this double attack or failure of American certainties linked to civil rights movement and the Vietnam War, those reactions were very contrasted. And I would say that this opposition between the reactions of the American citizens to those two events has structured American political debate, I would say, to the present days and to the present presidential campaign. We can always, we will be able to come back on that, but this is a different matter. But the polarization that we observe today in the American campaign and in the American consistent among the political community goes back to this situation. And this situation, the loss of a sense of self-justification, is also or can also be considered as one of the elements that allows Scanlon to formulate is a refoundation of moral philosophy as he did. So at the end of quote 2, what I would like to read is what he says about these reactions. He says, what these reactions had in common was a deep sense of shock and loss. Both testify, I believe, to the value people set on the belief that their lives and institutions are justified to others, are justifiable to others. So this idea of justifiability to others, central to the Scalonian foundation of morality, is an idea that emerges from a political situation. The value people set on the belief that their lives and institutions are justifiable to others. So here he uses another expression. This is very phenomenological, a description of a certain moment, but I find it quite interesting to see that there is an emergence of new philosophical ideas in the realm of moral philosophy that can be associated to that. So Scanlon himself speaks of the phenomenology of the particular historical case. There is a phenomenology of this particular historical case that says something about what morality is for him. He insists, Scanlon insists, that when we look carefully at the sense of loss occasioned by charges of injustice and immorality, we see it as reflecting our awareness of the importance for us of being in unity with our fellow creatures. So this expression, unity with fellow creatures, could be used also to describe the kind of relationship we can have inside a constituency, inside a political community. Yeah, I would say, I mean, there are probably very few political communities, nations, so to speak, that could be described today by this feeling of unity, because the people would have this feeling that their institutions would be justified, and they would have this kind of feeling. So this idea of unity is not Scanlonian, and it's an expression that he borrows from Mill's utilitarianism. So this is, but I think it describes quite well what is expecting from a moral relationship between the people. Beyond all that, all the things that can separate us, acting morally, induces a feeling of a common life. This is on the positive aspect. This is not guilt. This is not guilt. This is a positive feeling associated with morality. When we feel that we are justified in the way we behave, others are justified, we have this feeling of a common life. And that is that sense of a common moral life that historical events Vietnam War and the civil rights movement shattered in the US beyond repair. So the question, last point in this first series of remarks, I would like now to see, be a bit more specific about what is a characteristic of the Scanlonian conception of morality. Okay, we see this idea of justifiability to others, how it emerges in the context of American politics, but what is so specific about that? I would say that the object of Scanlon's reflection is not morality in general, nor the substantial content of morality, as, for example, the idea of the happiness of the greatest number can be in Bentham and Mill's utilitarianism, but what he calls what we owe to each other. So the object of Scanlon's reflection is what he calls what we owe to each other. This expression, very general, the title of his 1998 book, specifies the object of morality as being the determination of what we mean when we say that a situation or action or a person is right or wrong. This is why Scanlon says that his object, what he's working on, is not morality in general, but the morality of right and wrong. So the question he's dealing with is not primarily a question of knowing what is good or evil, but of knowing whether or not the relationship between people in a given political and economic state are just or unjust. And so you say, yeah, there's obviously there a proximity between Scanlon and what moved John Rawls in writing A Theory of Justice, because I have reformulating morality of right and wrong in the terms of morality of just and unjust. So the problem is, and this is a common problem to them both, and this is why I say there is a common feeling, a common philosophical culture that they are sharing, not just because one has been the student of the other, but more deeply, there is a commonality in the way of dealing with the problem of morality. To formulate it in a simple way, I would say, this is trying to make sense, philosophically speaking, of the moral disposition of men and women in their relationship to each other and to their institutions. I would just add this little note going further, because we had this discussion with Andrés, and of course, I mean, a seminar is also one way to go on discussing with friends. I mean, otherwise, what would seminars be good or made for? And so I would say here that the existence of positive laws and the constitution of the basis for positive law is, for both authors, Rawls and Scanlon, not enough. They must also be, for those two authors, and I know they are diverging views about that, they must also be for them a way to assess what I would call with them the morality of law. Of course, I mean, there's a huge debate about the meaning of that expression. And so I just mention it here because we see in the formulation of the problem by Scanlon, you say my problem is the morality of right and wrong. I reformulate it and say this is the morality of just and unjust. But there is also this idea that this level of morality, because I mean, you're lawyers, I mean, it's a seminar in the law department. Lawyers might say, we don't care about this. It's not our problem. And those authors, Scanlon and Rawls, try to put it on the fore to say that we've got to think as philosophers about the morality of law. So the next question is, what makes it so that coming back to the morality of right and wrong. I let law aside because it's not talking so much about law as about the morality of just and unjust. But the next question now is, what makes it so that our relationship with others possess this particular moral quality to be right or wrong? This quality, first, is not related to whether our actions would contribute to increasing the average quantity of well-being or satisfaction, as in the utilitarian approach to morality, but to the fact that our actions are likely to be justifiable to others. So, not increasing the level of satisfaction or desire, the fact that our desire is rich and their aim, but the fact that our actions can be justifiable to others. We have not yet specified what this justification consists of, nor what its status is or could be in moral philosophy. But at the phenomenological level, which is that of the second text on the handout, the important thing is that it has a particular moral quality, and that this moral quality has an impact on the perception of our relationship with others, independently of the level of total happiness. This text is obviously a response to a certain conception of morality, which would like to make relationship to others based only on the quantity of happiness in the nation. It is what Scanlon is talking about. It is clearly a break with utilitarianism. It is a break with Bentham's conception, but also with Mill's conception, who introduces a link between Mill, what is wrong, and what needs to be sanctioned by the law. And this is something which is of interest for Scanlon, the fact that in John Stuart Mill, the idea of wrongness, that something is wrong, is associated with the possibility of a legal sanction. To put it otherwise, the possibility of sanctioning wrong actions is not, for Scanlon, a constitutive element of a wrong action. The law sanctions because the action is wrong. The action is not wrong because it calls for sanction. Whereas in Mill, read by Scanlon, there is an ambiguity. The wrongness of something could be also linked or associated with the possibility or the necessity to sanction this action. So the approach of Scanlon is that something is wrong because it cannot answer to solid objections based on principles. So I very quickly read the third quote, because he formulates the problem in quite a casual way, which I find quite helpful in understanding what he means. So, quote number 3, I read it. What we need to do then is to explain more clearly how the idea that an act is wrong flows from the idea that there is an objection to a certain kind to people's being allowed to perform such actions, and we need to do this in a way that makes clear how an act being wrong in the sense described can provide a reason not to do it. An act is wrong, if I try to reformulate this, an act is wrong because there are substantial reasons that can be opposed to it. We've got good reasons to criticize or to object to the action as being done according to a certain principle. Of course, in a quote like that, but we won't have time to go very much into it because I see that the time is going by, and we don't want to be there still at midnight. So I've got to hurry up a bit. But I'm just indicating a few things for those of you who would not be familiar with this kind of thinking. The importance of the expression reason and the reasons and substantial reasons, since Scanlon is as a very interesting theory of reasons. For him, reason is not a faculty, but reason, it's especially, it's the reasons that we are exchanging. Why did you come late? Well, I say something, I'm sorry, I came late because there was traffic jam and I did all my best. And say, this is, reason is as a normative dimension. It's constituting also, it's part of the nature of our moral relationship. If we have moral relationship and not just juridical relationship between us, it's because we're exchanging reasons, that reasons have a substantive dimension. They are not just invention, it's not just subjective reasons, and that our moral life is based on our exchanging reasons. So here I was just saying that just to come back to that, to try to understand the connection that Scanlon is trying to establish between the wrongness of an act and the fact that there are certain kind of reasons that can be opposed to it. Okay, so an action is wrong. If an action is wrong, it's because there is a certain type of reasons that can be opposed to it. So let's try now and see first what that conception of wrongness means, and secondly, why it is not Kantian. So the first point, I'm coming to my second series of remarks, if you want, call it justifiability to others, a new foundation of morality of right and wrong. What does it mean? Of course, I'm obliged to just give a few indications or a few characteristics to come to my point. Why this new foundation is not Kantian, since it is the topic I suggested for tonight's talk. So first of all, the characteristic of the morality of right and wrong. We must now understand what characterizes this morality of just and unjust based on justifiability to others. So to make it simple, 2 points can be stressed. First point, this idea, this requirement just does justice to the Kantian idea that morality is not about satisfying preferences or desires. Morality is concerned not with our satisfactions or our desires. It is concerned with what is right or wrong. And it is not possible to define these notions in terms of more or less satisfaction with our desires or sympathetic inclinations. So this is a first point, and this is a Kantian element, obviously. This morality is not based on desire satisfactions. But there is a second aspect, second dimension, which is this justifiability of our actions to others is like an implicit hypothetical moral contract with all other human beings. And this is why when you read on Scanlon, the notion of contractualism is coming to the front. So this is an exchange of reasons, justifications, and this research for justifiability of our actions to others can be also interpreted in terms of contractualism. So my second remark is that this approach to morality is a contractualist approach to morality. And that moral contractualism means that an action can only be said to be right if it is liable of being justified against any principal claim that others could raise against it. So this is a bit complicated. This is a bit the point where Scanlon, we're coming closer to Scanlon's famous formulation of his moral contractualism. The first time anybody reads it, says, I didn't get anything. What is on the point? Why does he make it so complicated? So I'm not this. I'm just indicating where you find it, because you have it. This is the quote number 4. This is in section 3 of chapter 4, the wrongness and reasons of the book 1998 book, What We Owe to Each Other, and it's called. You find this definition in a contractualist account of motivation. Well, I'm not talking about moral motivation, but it's in this thing. So I don't know what I should do now. You know, there are always in seminars, you know, moments of great anxiety, moments of, you know, everybody gets afraid, and the person who is speaking is the person who's really getting afraid. He says, if I read quote number 4, I'm going to lose, especially when you're not in a proper room in front of me. I mean, if you were in a proper room, you cannot just go and take the door, because I would look at you. But here, I mean, I can't see you. So this is really, you know, a difficulty. If I read this, maybe I'm going to lose 50% off on the floor, you see. So this is really a responsibility when you speak. But anyway, so I really take my courage, as we say in French, je prends mon courage à deux mains. And so we just, you know, dive in this text, which is really awful. Sorry for that, but this is Cameron's responsibility, not mine. So quote number 4, contractualism holds that an act is wrong if its performance under the circumstances would be disallowed by any set of principles for the general regulation of behavior that no one could reasonably reject as a basis for informed and forced general agreement. Well, you've got to take a short breath before going on, which I do. If we all have good reason to want acts of a certain kind not to be performed, then it is likely that any principles allowing such acts could be reasonably rejected, hence that they will be wrong. But it does not follow that this will be so in every case in which a greater balance of happiness would result from such acts being punished. So forget about the last sentence and just focus. We focus on the beginning of the quote. To put it really simply, it says an action is wrong. Therefore, when there is an objection based on principles to the fact that some people may be allowed to commit these wrong actions, and the fact that an action is wrong provides a reason not to do it. So there are two ideas. An action is wrong if there are objections based on principle, that if it is possible to object to the principles on which this action is based. And this idea about principles says we are in a Kantian atmosphere of sorts. But the second idea is the fact that we can find an objection, a principal objection against this action. The fact that we can find this objection against this action provides a reason not to do it. And this is what Scallon is looking for. A substantial reason, so to speak, that could say, well, this action is wrong because there is this objection based on principle against it. But of course, the difficulty here is to find a link between the fact that an action is found to be worth opposing, objecting, and the reasons for not committing it. And it's not obvious. This explains maybe this difficulty of connecting the objection against this action, which we say this is wrong, and the reasons for not doing it. The difficulty of connecting the two explains the negative form of this formulation, which is at first surprising, that does not insist on the reasons why an action is right, but on the reasons why an action can be considered wrong. Well, just to put it very simply, you take on the one side, Rawlsian contractualism. Well, the Rawlsian contractualism is a positive construction. What is central is just to say, well, let's see and try to see how we could all agree on certain principles. Well, you say, well, this is it's a better way to approach the things. But Scanlon, Scanlon's morality insists on the characterization of wrong actions, wrongdoings, and it says, how can we characterize such an action? So this is a difficulty here. So let's move on, because I don't want to I think I still have, if I want to speak 40 minutes, 5 minutes, so maybe I'll have you let me speak 5 or 10 minutes more, just to come to some conclusions on which we could discuss. The problem here is to try and understand why this determination of what makes an action wrong is so difficult. So I'll try to formulate things a bit differently. An unjust action, I would say, is an action against the principle of which those who are victims could raise admissible objections. This is a point that must be emphasized. The wrongness we commit or the harm we suffer is not always as obvious as one might think. And this is why I think a Scanlon approach is interesting. Take the case of slavery in the French West Indies, what we call in France, in French, les Antilles Françaises. They were people who made a living from this trade without being overly concerned about the harm they caused to slaves, but were concerned above all about the benefits they got from this trade. So, okay, this is an historical example, but let's take another more casual, current example. Today, too, there are many people, and sometimes we are among them, who take advantage of what I would call, I like this expression, brutal but legal system. Would say legal but brutal system of exploitation, and who do not pay attention to the conditions under which others work to produce, for example, shoes or clothes. The social world places us in situations that are not necessarily condemned by law, but that force us to question the way in which we justify the actions we take in relation to others, whom we may not know and whom we do not know most of the time. And it is this situation, you see, of, I would say, this situation in which we are all involved because we live in an interconnected world, even as far as epidemics are concerned. So it is this situation of interconnection that Scanlon has also in his mind. And so I would say that the interest of Scanlon's foundation of morality is that it can address those situations or examples I have just recalled. To say it otherwise, what is interesting in Scanlon's discovery is the fact that to be moral is to care not only about the consequences of our actions, but about whether the principles of our actions are likely to be morally challenged by others. So when I use the term consequences of our actions, of course, I mean, you say, well, I mean, this Scanlon guy is not a consequentialist, and this is what I would like to stress here. The point here, his idea was just about morality. What morality is he's got another paper called What is Morality? For him, morality is to be moral, is to care about whether the principles of our actions are likely to be morally challenged by others. And this is something, as you are, most of you, lawyers and philosophers, this is something which I find quite interesting, because in this definition of morality, or redefinition of the foundations of morality, I find a situation quite comparable to a certain extent to the situation you have in a tribunal, where people, where the question is that the principles of certain actions are challenged by others, the claimants, who say, well, I mean, you didn't behave rightly, you did wrongly, and so. But here we're in the field of morality, and this is a tribunal-like structure that seems to be there. Of course, the plaintiffs are not real plaintiffs, as in the example I gave. If those who made my shoes are kids, living very far away, the probability that the kids themselves would be able to sue me because I bought shoes that have been made by children in slave-like conditions is very little. So, but there is this structure. So this is just to sum it up and just go to the last part of my talk. I've already been too long. But the point which is important here is first canon morality is not about assessing the consequences of our actions, not knowing, well, okay, I did that, but the consequences are bad and so on. This is not the point. To be moral is, before acting or enacting, to care about whether the principles of my actions are likely to be challenged by others. Who would say, wow, the principle of your action is no good, and you don't realize it. So this is it. Well, I'm aware that I'm formulating this in a very gross manner, so I apologize for that. I'm just trying to make the point for myself. But such an obligation based on principles, and this is, I'm coming back to our friend Immanuel Kant. Why, after all, isn't it compatible with Kantianism? So, last point, last series of remarks. Why, after all, isn't what I've just described, this foundation of morality on the justifiability to others, not Kantian? So, because there are elements of analogy, there are elements which you find in Kant that you find also in Scanlon. And Scanlon himself, in What We Owe to Each Other, recognizes that he may seem to some to be a Kantian. So this is quote number 5, where he says, well, I mean, I'll let you read it because it's too long and we're getting tired, but I'm just summarizing it. There are two elements in quote number 5. And where Scanlon says, well, I mean, if you read my book too quickly, you could say, well, I mean, it's just another Kantian, So there are two elements of Kantianism, anyway, in the tuning. The first element is the idea that the rightness of an action is determined by whether it would be allowed by principles that no one would reasonably reject. We could call that first element the deontological element in both Kant's and Scanlon's approaches to morality. So what they have in common is the insistence on principles, and this insistence of principles makes Kantian and Scalonian moralities or approach to moralities deontological. So not consequentialist. They don't immediately care about the consequences. They care about the principles that underlie our action. So this is the first element, which is a central element, which really would make Scanlon's position and Kant's position close one to the other. There is a second element, which is not an analogy, but a second proximity, I would say, between the two authors, which is, says Scanlon, always in the quote number 5, linked to the method used in moral philosophy by both authors. And here, Scanlon is thinking about the book he found in the basement of Blackwell's in 1963. in the groundwork of metaphysics of morals, where do you start from? You start from our considered judgments about morality. Of course, all the thing first action of the groundwork, goodwill, but also the fact that we've got this capacity of judgments, making judgments on morality. And Scanlon also starts with what he calls the distinctive reason-giving force of judgment of right and wrong. Well, I mean, it's not so clear when he puts it like that. I mean, Kant is not always easy, but Scanlon is still more difficult sometimes. But the idea is basically the same. We have those moral judgments, and we're starting from there. And what we do is try to understand how those judgments can be possible. On Kant's side, it's how can a synthetic, a priori judgment in the domain of morality is possible. And in Scanlon, it's about substantial reasons. Well, okay, so this is just element of similitudes, but there are also dissimilitudes, and this is I'm coming to an answer to the question about why Scanlon cannot be said a Kantian. It is not so easy to characterize the differences between the two deontological theories, and this is in quote 6, and there we've got to go through that, I fear. But this is the penultimate quote, so this is almost done. Here is what Scanlon says about the differences between, and I would say, just to make it also, I don't know how familiar you are with those things, but this debate of Scanlon with Kant is not just purely academic, or it is academic in the sense that in his own department, in Harvard University, one of his colleagues, I think he was on a committee, Christine Korsgaard, is really one of the stronger defendants today of Kantianism. And they're behind this whole discussion about how much Kantianism is there in Scanlon theory. There is a strong debate between two major figures in moral theory, which is Christine Korsgaard doesn't take Scanlon's justification of morality. And Scanlon, when he says, I don't want to be a Kantian, he says, I want to defend a position which is not Christine Korsgaard's position. You see, behind that, there is a strong fight within this department. Let's read the quote number 6, where he tries to say why I'm not a Kantian, why I don't agree with Christine. So, but my account of the reasons supporting our concern with the rightness of our actions is very different from Kant's. Our concern, my concern, as Scanlon. My strategy, says Scanlon, is to describe these reasons in substantive terms that make clear why we should find them compelling. So the substantive reasons we found a bit earlier. This is not what Kant does. So, quote again. Why Kant sought to explain the spatial authority of moral requirements by showing how they are grounded in conditions of our rational agency, I try to explain the distinctive importance and authority of the requirements of justifiability to others by showing how other aspects of our lives and our relations with others involve this idea. The result is an account of right and wrong that is, in Kant's terms, avowedly heteronymous. So I try to simplify that, to make it as simple as possible. And here what I would say. What Scanlon tried to do is to say that the reasons why we would object to certain ways of behaving, to certain actions, to certain public policies, those reasons are, so to speak, substantial reasons, which means they are not depending on my capacity as a rational agent. Those reasons are not linked to the fact that I'm capable of reasoning, that I'm an autonomous person, that I follow a certain number of rules. Those reasons are substantial, and as such, they constitute a refutation of wrongness, and also they constitute good reasons for me not to write wrongly. Whereas if you're a Kantian, like Kant, or like Christian Korsgaard, you would say that for determining what is right or wrong, you need to consider the fact that you are who you are. You must consider who you are. You must consider that right and wrong have a connection with your capacity as a rational or reasonable agent. And so this is a strong divide. This is a strong divide. So it's not important to say that Kant would say canon is in the heteronomy. What is important to understand, and why is not a Kantian, and where the debates lie in terms of foundation of moral philosophy, that for Scanlon, as far as determining the difference between right and wrong or justice and unjust is concerned, we don't need to take into consideration the fact that we are autonomous agent capable of rationality, of following rules, and this is something which is very important, since I would try to put it another way, and before I conclude. First, Cameron, what matters is that one must determine oneself to act not according to a single principle of practical reason, the categorical imperative and its formulations, but according to the multiple possible demands of others. And this is what matters. In Kant, when you address Kant's ethics, the demands of others are not central. What is central is my connection with the categorical imperative, the way that I integrate that in my practical reasoning. Whereas for Scanlon, what is central is the link of morality with the multiple possible demands of others in this realm. In the last quote, and I will go very quickly because I've been speaking 45 minutes and I'm just really coming to the end of this already too long talk, but I think I needed to add this quote. Maybe I'm not going to read it entirely. This is a quote by Christian Korsgaard in a volume on essays on the philosophy of Scanlon, and what she is trying to do. And she says in this quote, in the Kantian conception that I favor, there are three aspects of reasons. The three aspects are the faculty of reason, the rational principles, and the substantive reasons. They are closely related. So she says, for me, you cannot address moral philosophy if you forget one of those elements. Whereas what Scanlon does and wants to do is to address the question of the morality of right and wrong, of just and unjust, on the sole basis of one of these three, that is, substantive reasons. And this is where, if you want, the distinction between the two. So what I said before is what Christian Korsgaard is saying here in a much better way. But this is just to explain where we have come. So if I wanted to conclude quickly, saying what have I said? I mean, it's just basically I'm just trying to formulate for myself as clearly as possible, and I think I haven't been clear enough what is at stake in the Scanlonian attempt at refoundation of morality. So first thing that I tried to show was that this very abstract, it is very abstract, formulation of the foundation of morality, indeed, as its roots in a political situation, the situation of the United States in the 1960s. And this idea of justifiability to others, which is supposed to be the replacement of the Kantian foundation for morality, has indeed a political origin, so to speak. So this is the first remark, the first series of remark I did. The second series of remark was trying to understand why this justifiability to others thing could be interesting in the perspective of our way of thinking about what morality is. Basically, for Scanlon, morality, it's this realm in which when we act, if we're moral persons, when we act, we are considering, reflecting on the principle of our action from the perspective of others. What could others object against the principle that I have chosen for my action? And so this way of putting the problem of morality really puts others, multiple others, even people that we don't know, to the forefront. And this is something I think is interesting for us to consider. A morality based not on autonomy, on our capacity to give laws to ourselves, but on what objections others may raise against us. So I just suggested maybe as a way for the discussion, I don't know how far we can go along that line, but it seems to me that there is maybe a juridical-like or juridical-like aspects or dimension of this Scanlonian morality, since, the Planians come first. The Planians come first, and then I've got to examine the reasons, but also the Planians are there bringing substantial reasons. And this is the last thing I would like to with which I would like to conclude this already too long talk, which is that what is difficult to understand, but at the same time really fascinating in Scanlon is the fact that they are substantial reasons. So when people come with, in this realm of morality, when people come with a critic of my actions saying this is wrong, you've acted wrongly, what they do is that they bring, the proof is a substantial reason. And then we've got to discuss it. How substantial is this reason? Is it really a substantial reason? Or is it not a substantial reason? So here it is. Thank you for listening to me, and sorry for having been a bit too long. I'll be happy now to discuss with you and see if I have answers to your questions.
Thank you, Luc. Actually, your talk raises many interesting issues, and I have the privilege of open the fire, as it were, friendly fire, I hope, if you allow me. Actually, I have a couple of questions. I think it would be better if I start by posing them to you one by one. So I would start with the first one, and then as further questions come along, we'll read them read them to you. Well, first of all, just to start the conversation, we've been talking about Scanlon's relationship to Kant and Kantianism in general, and I think for ages, everybody thinks he's a Kantian, and yet here it is, this poor guy trying to explain why he's not Kantian. So perhaps we might start off with this question. Where does this confusion come from? Is it this book he bought by Patton, as you explained, in Blackwell's 40 years ago, and he's been telling everybody that he read this book, and this is why we confuse him for a Kantian of all people? That actually does not quite sound as a compliment.
Yeah, well, no, thank you for this question. Yes, you're right. I mean, everybody would say he's a Kantian because he's obsessed with principles. He's developing deontological reflection on the groundwork of moral philosophy and so on. So I think one of the reasons he's obsessed with putting these differences because, I mean, it was very interesting. In the interview, when I discussed with him, I understood something. There are two ideas in his philosophy. The one idea is the fact that normative philosophy is about giving reasons. So this idea of reasons in the plural, which is the first chapter of his 1998 book, is very central to him. And the second idea is justifiability to others. And I think that the answer to your question is that you would say, maybe, if people take him for a Kantian, it's because some of his readers have not understood properly what he wanted to do or what he meant when he says that normative philosophy is about reasons. And so I would like, this is not enough. What is important here is that the idea that the fact that we're exchanging those reasons all the time, and that makes us normative beings or moral beings, has also a consequence on the non-centrality of desire or will in the description of what I would say, would call our moral psychology. And this is where I would say that's explaining why he doesn't want to be taken for a Kantian. Why? Because Kant's moral psychology, so to speak, is based on desire. The faculty of desire is central to the whole description that Kant gives of what morality is. What to be moral for Kant is to establish a certain link between our capacity to desire and the moral law, the categorical imperative. That is what is to be Kantian. Right. But if you are a Scalonian, what disappears is the centrality of the desire. And instead of this centrality of the desire, what he puts for it is substantial reasons. The reasons that are constitutive of his description of normativity allow him to put desire aside. And I would say, I mean, just to make it short, not to be too long, but I would say this is why when you look at the principles, deontology, you say, well, this guy is a Kantian. I agree with you. But when you take seriously what Scalon says about what is my main idea, well, justifiability to others, it's not so important, and I'm not sure I would just still follow along that line. But what is really the great discovery I made is the theory of reasons. Then you say, well, okay, so let's look at Kant in this perspective. Well, Kant would never say that normativity is a question of reasons, substantial reasons. It would say normativity is about autonomy. It's about a certain way to format our desires. I don't know if I answer your point.
No, it's okay. Right. Thank you. Now, I'll read to you another question from the public. There are plenty when it came from my end, but now I'll give the floor to a question from the public, actually. From Carlos Gonzalez, I'm sorry. I'll read it to you. Regarding the broad conception of reasonability, regarding the broad conception of reasonability, Scanlon defends at the beginning of moral dimensions, between inverted quotes, according to which it is needed just a quote, reasoning within some kind of system, end of quotation. How can we act in a way that respects a moral given in a certain relationship, in that there are so many different ways of reasoning? I mean, ex ante, it's kind of difficult to know in any action, to know if my action will be discussed by the ones it can affect, given the various ways of reasoning. This is a quote. So
yeah.
I'm not sure if I was able to
this is
get across in any understandable.
Thank you to you, and thank you to Carlo for raising this question. Of course, I mean the idea that would be that if we have, but this is an interesting question because which goes back to our previous discussion. I would say it like that because.
So my question wasn't interesting then.
No, your question was very interesting
right.
Because I mean the point here, if I take it right, I mean I reformulated. It's just saying, well, we've got different ways of reasoning. Okay, we're different people, and there are people in different situations, and so we're reasoning in different ways. How can we rely on this idea that morality would be about objecting reasonably against certain principles? If we reason differently, if we follow different principles and so on, well, I mean, this is maybe silly to say, as Cameron wants us to say that morality would be about objecting. Well, okay, you're objecting, but you're reasoning in a different way. So here, I would say that this objection is an objection formulated along the line of Kantianism. Why? Because in Kantianism, there is this idea that we've got a certain number of, there are substantive reasons, but there are also the faculty of reason, and there are rules for reasoning. And so if you're a Kantian, of course, you will say that there is a structure which is common to everybody, but you could be also still in line with Kant and introducing some plurality in the ways of reasoning. And I took the Carlo's objection to be along that line and saying, well, okay, well, if we've got faculties of reason, okay, but maybe we've got different ways of reasoning, and so it undermines the strength of the objections. And so the principle of Scanlon is not right. But now, if you remember that for Scanlon, the basis of normativity is not our capacity to reason and the rules of reasoning, but only substantial reasons, well, I would say that this objection falls. I mean, Scanlon would say, well, the problem is about the substantial reasons that can be raised against the principle of my action. The objection is not about the fact that the person who has been raising or formulating this objection would have such and such capacity and would be following such and such reasonings. And I think the question raised by Carlo is interesting for that reason, because it shows how much of Kantianism is in our way to approach Scanlon, and if we see more clearly that Scanlon is following another path, well, then it might be interesting just to say, well, okay, the point is just substantial reasons.
More questions are coming your way, but in the meantime, I'd like to pose another question. You say that as far as Kant is concerned, there is no choice regarding morality. Of course, according to Kant, morality is a practical question, it's a question of action, and we can only be moral and responsible if we are free. Then naturally he assumes we have the choice of being moral. But then I think you are referring to normativity in terms of a metaethical question. So your point might be that as far as Kant is concerned, there's no choice regarding talking about metaethical questions. And yet he would say there is a choice, and the reasonable choice is to claim that at the end of the day, morality comes from reason, from our idea of rational agency. So why would you say that as far as Kant is concerned, there's no choice regarding morality, no reasonable choice, when in that case, I would agree, everybody claims that they have their own ground of, and our choice is the reasonable one. And in that case, we would say, I had no choice but to claim this. So,
yeah. No, I got it. No, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm just a point of clarification, because I mean, you're referring to a part of the text which I have abandoned, but your question is interesting. No, it's not. I'm going to answer it because, as a matter of fact, it's not me who say that in Kant there is no,
right.
that yes, the question of the choice of morality is not a question. It's a Scanlon in a chapter of a collective volume which is called "What is Morality?" And Scanlon,
I'm sorry. So why would we say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. I was just so why should we say that? I would say that for Scanlon reading Kant, if he says in Kant there is no choice for morality, it's because of what the categorical imperative is. The categorical imperative for Kant imposes on us. Of course, I mean, it's just whatever we want it or not, there is a sort of imposition of the moral law on the subjects. Of course, we can do as if we would ignore it, and we know the definition of evil in Kant, making exception to the law. But even if you take Kant's definition of what evil is, the evil for Kant is to say, well, I know what the rule is for it, because the moral law is imposed on us, but I will do an exception. I know that I've got to pay my taxes, or I know that I've got to respect my partners and so on, but this time I do an exception. This is the definition of what evil is. But when you take it seriously, you say, I mean, if Kant defines evil via the notion of doing an exception, it means that we have no choice. The moral law is imposed on us. So the question of making a choice or trying to do as Callicles does in the Gorgias, when Callicles is just trying to just as Nietzsche will do later on, just to say, well, but morality is not that obvious. You can look at things differently, and you could just as well say that morality is an expression of a certain will for power or the weak and so on. This is a way to try to avoid the moral law and its centrality. But in Kant, you haven't got this possibility. And this is why I'm a bit too long in my answer, but
no.
I don't know if it's a good answer, but this is how I take it, what Scanlon wanted to say.
So, and finally, on my part anyway, let's take it out to Scanlon. Scanlon claims that it is not just all about the viewpoint of the agent, which is mainly Kant's viewpoint, but we'd rather take into account the position of at the other end of the action, if you will, the receiving end of the action. I was about to say the victim. But that is the point. How could we able to make a distinction between being at the receiving end of an action and being a victim? If it's up to the victim to decide that the victim is not ready to approve of my action, since the victim seems to be in charge of the explanation.
Yeah.
My action must be justifiable to the victim. If the victim, of course, goes up, as it were, and claims defensive principle, this might sound Kantian anyway, so we will go back to square one, if you will, or back to Kantian territory. So how does Scanlon, or I mean, anybody for that matter, defend this justifiability viewpoint in itself without claiming going up all the way up to Kantian principles, as it were, going back to rational agency for that matter?
Well, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, it's, yeah, the claimants, I mean, the point of view, you say the point of view of the victims, but, well, victims is...
Look, if I may, Luc, yeah, I understand. This is an offer, a reason we can't refuse. But the question is why?
Why, yeah.
And at the end of the day, the answer is, well, I'm the victim. So if I come up with a principle, so this sounds very much Kantian in a way, which was the position we've been trying to move away from, actually, which is actually what Scanlon said. Scanlon says he's been moving away from Kantianism. So he was Kantian at the beginning, and then I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry.
No, but the point. No. This is I was thinking. So thank you for expliciting. I mean your point of view, because it's
right.
I think yes. What is new? I mean, it's I take it like that. I mean, it just I would say when I'm acting. I mean, I'm just about to act. I've got doubts about the action I'm going to do, and the perspective, the Scalonian perspective on my action is to consider what I would call, I mean, it's just possible objections against what I take to be a good course of action. So this is where there is some kind of inversion of the perspectives, because the question is not am I capable of universalizing the maxim of my action? Can I make it the universal law? But so this is Kantian, but the perspective, a Scalonian perspective would say, isn't in there somewhere an objections that could be raised against this principle that I take to be a good principle for my action? So what I'm looking is a good objections against the principle of my action. And this is a different perspective in terms of morality. It's not just trying to establish a world based on my principle of action. It's just trying to see if there might not be objections that I could not reject. This is why I take away the question of victims, but an objection that could be raised against the principle of my action. It's not universal. It's not the question of making it universal, but isn't there an objection that someone might raise, and an objection that would be so strong that I could not reject it, you see? And this is just like in the tribunal. I mean, somebody brings a proof. I mean, it's objective. I've this video. I've seen this. You've done it. I put it there. Everybody looks at it and say, okay, yes. I mean, it's pretty bad. You see, and this is more of that. I mean, this is more of, isn't there something like this kind of objections of proof that could be raised against my principal action, and which I could not reject.
Because if I may elaborate just a bit, I think Scanlon, if he wants to avoid going back to Kantianism, he ends up adopting some version of consequentialism. You could say, and a Kantian agent would say, okay, I have to drop a bomb, say, on victims, of course. But this is a side effect of my action. I don't intend quite to kill them. So I'm not saying that every Kantian has to agree to this, but this is something that might be Kantian in spirit. A consequentialist would say, no, we should actually adopt the viewpoint of the victims, and victims who don't want to, blow up. But this is a question of the consequence of the action. So how does Scanlon manage to avoid going back to Kantianism without ending up adopting this consequentialist position, if you like? Because I take it that Scanlon is defending a kind of Kantian consequentialism.
Yeah, well, no, this is an interesting, This is difficult because, of course, I mean, it's got many examples when you come to discussing things in, for example, you've got all these very strange situations where your situation is interesting because you're dropping a bomb to stop the war, but the side effect, or to kill the evil guys, but the side effect that you're killing the innocents. And so this is a classical case in war theory, the theory of double effect. But you have those situations where to save 5, you've got to kill an innocent, and various, or you've got 2 people in a boat. So one is going to drown. One is say and can get out, but the other is going to drown if you don't cut a leg or an arm of the innocent person. And then you're just trying to think what are the principles that could guide you. If you're a consequentialist, you're going to say, well, I'm going to weigh the consequences. If I need to cut the arm of this person to save the other guy, where one is going to be with arm less and the other one will be saved. But this is consequentialism. If you're a Scanlonian in this case, the question would be to say, what objections should the guy who's going to be with one less arm going to say, and what reasons could he put forward against this solution, which in a utilitarian perspective would be better, because the 2 guys would survive. One would survive without an arm. And if you don't cut the arm of this guy, what is going to happen? One person is going to die. So in a consequentialist perspective, you've got to cut the arm of the person. But in a Scanlonian perspective, they could be good reasons for good reasons, not personal reasons, but good reasons themselves to object to the fact of cutting the arm of someone to save somebody else. And this is on cases like that. You see, because you've got to go down to cases, precise cases, that you could see the difference between a consequentialist view, who would take only into consideration, let's say, the results, winning the war, for example, even if dozens or many innocents would be killed. Or in this example where you've got 2 people, you could, in a consequentialist perspective, you would have this say, okay, go ahead. And in a Scanlonian perspective, you would not be able to allow for this amputation of the one to save the other. You see, so this is why I don't take it, but maybe I would not say that Scanlon is a consequentialist, because the substantial reasons are not primarily questions of well-being, satisfaction, or desire satisfaction. This is the point which is very strong, which is that the way we consider the consequences of action. I've got something, I want to do something, so I take the means and I do that. This perspective is not the perspective of substantial reasons, which can be of various kinds. It really helps us get out of consequentialism to a certain extent and be able to value other kinds of reasons.
Right.
But what you say, it's still too general. Sorry.
No. Right. Now, I think Martin Farrell has a question, a member of our faculty.
Okay.
If I'm not wrong.
Thank you, Andrés. First of all, Professor Foisneau, congratulations for your paper and your lecture. And I agree with you that Scanlon is not a Kantian, of course, not a consequentialist. Scanlon is a substantive deontologist, whereas Kant is a formal deontologist. I dislike both types, but I especially dislike the strategy of Scanlon that you perfectly well describe in pages 9 and 10, which you call quite correctly the negative form of the formulation, because Scanlon is concerned with if we all have a good reason to want acts of a certain kind not to be performed. With this strategy, we could only have duties concerning omissions, not actions. If I do nothing, if I don't save the baby drowning by my side with no risk at my coat, I can be blamed. And so this is perhaps quite good for a libertarian who is thinking only on negative duties. But Scanlon is not a libertarian. Scanlon is a liberal egalitarian. So he can't be satisfied with this position, with this solution. Take the case of Benham. Benham proceeds exactly the other way around. Benham began defining the right act, not the wrong one. The right act is that which maximizes general happiness. And then, and only then, he proceeds to define the wrong act. So you have duties in Benhamism, duties concerning omissions, but also duties concerning acts. And I prefer very much this last strategy. I confess that I have read 3 times Scanlon's book since '98. The first time alone, the other 2 in seminar, and I never found its attraction. I can't find it in the last 22 years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Farrell, for this question, which is, this is interesting just to know that you've been teaching on him, on Scanlon, reading him, and that you have not been convinced by his positions. I mean, it's just, and that I take it that you are much more convinced by Bentham's approach for the reason that you said, that you find it preferable to start with the definition of what the right act or right action is before coming to the understanding or description of what a wrong action would be. Indeed, I mean, I think, but I'm not going to, I mean, you know Scanlon very well, so, but maybe, obviously, I mean, the reference to Bentham is interesting, but it's not entirely satisfying in the way that Scanlon, after all, constructed its philosophy against utilitarianism. So there is a huge gap. They develop their theories against utilitarianism, but maybe And I started I gave a hint on that previously, maybe to develop, and precise your insatisfaction with a Scanlon, a comparison with Rawlsian contractualism might be telling, because as a matter of fact, Rawls is strongly trying to make a case against utilitarianism, but he develops a theory in which the priority is given to defining principles of justice. So he's got the Rawlsian strategy is a direct strategy. It's a strategy of choice, as everybody knows, a strategy of choice aiming at determining principles of justice. Why does Scanlon not follow the Rawlsian way? I'm just trying to reformulate your objection against the negative approach of Scanlon, and which is also the particularity or specificity of his contractuarianism or contractualism. And this is something which indeed has been discussed. For example, it's another text you probably know, but which I find quite useful when talking about this, which is a text published in 2002, so 4 years after What We Owe to Each Other, by Derek Parfit, called On What Matters. And in volume 1, you've got very interesting comparison between Kantian contractualism, Rawlsian contractualism, and Scanlonian contractualism. And the conclusion of it, Parfit is a very interesting philosopher, of course, but he comes to this conclusion that for him, the variety of contractualism which he finds the most convincing is the Scanlonian one. But at the same time, he perceives in the Scanlon 4 years after What We Owe to Each Other elements of transformation, of change in the way he formulated his own or reformulated his own contractuarianism. And I think that might be a way just to see that the strategy developed in 1998 has been transformed also, and maybe in ways that could give it maybe more strength. But anyway, thank you. It's more a comment on that, because it's just I'm not going to convince you just to change your position on it, but just to give a few more elements. I think that's maybe the comparison with a positive contractuarianism would be helpful, because starting with Bentham makes it more difficult, because it's the position which those Rawls and Scanlon wants to get away with. I don't know. I'm sorry for maybe a bit confused, but I tried to.
I have this.
Go ahead, Andrés.
Yes, this question from Santiago Poznansky. Professor Foisneau, how can an agent get to know the objections others might take to him based on substantial reasons? Are those reasons self-evident? Must the agent practice an empathy exercise to get to know them, I think? It's,
Wow. Well, of course, it's, take the case of slavery, quoted in the French slave masters, for whom, it was it just, you can say also there is to answer or to comment on this question, it's the status of substantial reasons. How come that at certain periods in our history, well, substantial reasons such as reasons against slavery, which seems to be the big evil, well, people would not find it objectionable. So there is this idea that's in the Scannonian theory or contractualism. The element of historicity is, so to speak, ignored. I mean, as the reasons are substantial, well, they were valid in the time of the Romans, in the time of Napoleon, and in our time. But what we observe, I mean, when we think about those moral questions, is that our moral sensitivity to the objections against behaviors are also very different according the historical period. So just to rephrase your question, which is very interesting, but I rephrase it I just try to put canon in historical perspective. And, I mean, it's very, just take Me Too, the objections of women against behaviors of males in movies, in every film, etc. You take you go back 50 years before, and you see, but how come that nobody raised those objections? The objections, those are substantial reasons, and the historical situation is that nobody. So what would canon say about that? You've got two possibilities. One possibility is just sheer relativism about morality, and saying that there are no substantial reasons in the field of morality. There is what we call historical reasons. Okay, so in the 1930s, this objection was no objection, and now, 2020, those objections are objections. But of course, if you say that, you mean that you ruin all possibility of moral philosophy, not only Kantian moral philosophy, but Scannonian moral philosophy, because you say that there are no substantial reasons. They are only, how to put that? I mean, they are only position of force in the social domain. But this is the ruin of all morality. So, but if you take Scanlon seriously, to go back to your question, if you take Scanlon seriously, you would have to say that behavior X, which is nowadays condemned publicly in front of tribunal, in front of the tribunal of public opinion, has always been an objective or substantial reason against identical behaviors. So you're obliged to say that, and this is the force of all theories of morality. Probably Kant would develop the same thing. Would say, this behavior, can you, this maxim of your action, can you universalize it? No, you could not universalize it before, but before it was not prosecuted. So this is the difference between the domain of politics, the domain of law, and the domain of morality. But of course, then you can turn to morality again. But if you're a moral philosopher, I think, just to make it short, to answer your question, if you're a moral philosopher in a Scalinian way, you're obliged to say, well, I mean, being moral, sometimes I don't realize that there's an objection against, but being moral is just to try and figure out the good reasons that people whom I might not know may raise against the principle of my action. So this is very general. Then you can say, well, but how do you know that this is a good reason? Of course, there are epistemological questions that could be raised, but taking the example of Me Too is too simple, but it's a good example. But this is why I didn't take this example first, because it's an interrelation between a man and a woman. So you cannot, I didn't know what I was doing, and so on and so on. Yeah, well, you knew what you were doing. You were in a position of force, and so you obtain a certain number of favor because of this relationship of force. So, but you say, well, it's the way it goes. It's the custom, and we do like that in the university, and so on. So this is historical relativism, but from a moral point of view, it's difficult to defend this position. Whereas for today, if you take the fact of buying shoes or things like that, they are cheap, you can have those for nothing. And so you say, well, okay, so I take it because nobody's going to say, well, I did do the shoe, I'm exploited and I'm going to leave for 30 years because I did do your shoes that you're buying at a very low price, but you never know. This is morality, means that, of course, I'm supposed to inform myself on the chain of production. And you know this kind of, I'm not going to develop on that, but the moral position, according to Scanlon, is this one. Are we moral beings? Clearly no. But do we have means to determine objective or substantial objections against some of our actions? Certainly yes. But we don't do it because, just being moral is sometimes difficult. We don't take time, and nobody's going to sue us. This is what the moral dimension is. But I think Scanlon as a case, thinking not necessarily of victims, but thinking of possible objections against our course of action, the principles that guide our action, has probably to do with what being moral means. And this is why I'm not so critical as Professor Farah was. I've got you realized it. During this talk, but I think that Scanlon as a case, I think that he says something about the foundation of morality that is distinct from Kantianism. I'm not convinced by the fact that I should maximize and universalize the maxim of all my actions and so on. So he's got a case against Kant, and he's got also a proposition, a philosophical proposition, which is something quite rare, sufficiently rare to be underlined, a philosophical proposition just to understand what being moral might mean. That is, trying to figure out what objections might be raised against the principle of my action, even if I don't do it. Anyway, we know we're not moral beings all the time. We know the limits. But still, if there is morality, if morality means something, maybe this way of putting things is interesting. In the other paper, I can't remember where he published it, but it's been published somewhere. What is morality? Initially, I wanted to talk from that paper, and then I came back to what we owe to each other. But in this paper, he says something very interesting about the choice for morality, and he is coming back to Callicles and Nietzsche. And I think, it's just Scanlon is aware of the fact that some people, calling them Nietzschean people, would just say that there are no substantial reasons in the domain of morality, and that morality is just a way for certain categories of people to impose on others. So this is another approach, but this is a radical critic of what morality is. And I think Scanlon is quite aware of that, and he's just, as all moral philosophers, is trying to make a point in favor of the moral perspective on things and relation between the people. And this is why I started with this idea that for Scanlon, morality is not just about guilt, just about repression, about negative feelings, but he really tries to make the point that morality is about being able to establish a certain kind of relations between the people. And this is nothing to do with being weak or being, yes, weak people in a Nietzschean perspective. But still, he is aware that some people would not take it at all. I would say, for example, that, well, there is a plurality of reasoning, and some people consider that this action is good, some others no. There's no way, no tribunal, no moral tribunal. Whereas Scanlon is trying to say, well, there are substantial reasons.
Professor, I take the privilege of making the last question, and that is because I can unmute myself without asking for permission. Perhaps I shouldn't be asking a question in the middle of a discussion among philosophers, because I'm just a simple mortal. I'm an obscure lawyer that teaches constitutional law, but I'll take the risk. And it's the following. I feel that I'm not familiar with Scanlon, so perhaps I'm misunderstanding something, but the feeling that I get with this is that it's a feeling of emptiness, because it seems that in certain cases Scanlon doesn't provide a solution, an answer to the moral dilemmas. And let's put an example to it: abortion. If you look at abortion from a moral perspective, I myself, I'm morally against abortion, but I do recognize that if I get into a discussion with somebody that is in favor of abortion, he will have certain objections to my views, but also I would have objections to his views. And these are substantial objections from both sides. So it seems that if I got it correctly, there would be no solution to that. There would be no answer, no moral answer. Both positions would be amoral, because both, from each perspective, you would have to put yourself in the other person's position, and that person would have objections to my position. So is there a way in which Scanlon would solve this, would give us an answer, would just say, well, this is a difficult question that is difficult to resolve? I don't know if I was clear enough in my question.
No, this is very clear. Thank you. No, thank you for this question. Yes, I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, as a matter of fact, I mean, just to make it simple, I don't know what Scanlon, if he has written, he probably has. So, but I haven't got the text present in my mind, so makes it difficult. So maybe he's written a text answering precisely to your point, and I don't know it. So I mean, it's first I must avow my ignorance on that. But to take the case, because it's the question here in the what I would say in the way you reconstruct the debate between a person who would be morally in favor of abortion or morally against abortion. The point here, what I take it to be, I mean, it's a debate. So people have arguments, one against the other. But the moral point, I mean, is not concerning the relation between the two people who are making objections, the one to the other. I mean, the point is that in the case you're raising, you've got two people having opinion A and opinion B, and they are objecting each other to the case. But I mean, what is the question in this case is that those two people are not, these objections and debate they have together is not part of a moral relationship between those two people. The moral relationship, I mean, what you have to construct, or what Scanlon has to construct in this perspective, is to see who might have an objection against whom. And in a Scannonian perspective, for example, in the case of abortion, you would say, where they are, who are the relevant persons? There is the doctor who is against abortion, for example, the woman who wants to abort, and let's say, what is the position of the fetus? You see, I'm just trying to reconstruct the case. And so if you reconstruct the case and you're trying to see what the reasons might be on the different sides, there is the question of knowing whether the fetus might have objective reasons. Does it have, I mean, substantial reasons? Has it got a meaning? How can you, I'm not developing on that, I'm just describing the situation. Has it got, and it's a whole debate, so you know it better than me, but it's the perspective, are they substantial reasons associated to the fetus? Okay. And then what are the reasons of the doctor? What does he say? You say, I've got a reservation, I don't want to operate or to intervene because of such and such reasons. And then there are the reasons of the woman, whom we could just suppose here, that she would like to have an abortion, you see? And so I think that the confrontation would not be between two intellectuals in the press, in a department of philosophy, who would be discussing the topic, but it would be just to see what the objective or the substantial reasons of the various actors are. You see, I mean, I'm not just going to go into it because I don't know, as I say, probably Scanlon has written on it and I don't know it. But this is how I would answer your point. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yes, it does. Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
As I was saying, Luc, I gave you my word. We will call it a day by 5. And here we are talking at 6:30. Actually, a quarter, 20 to 6. So this is our way of doing things. And, you know, I couldn't
It's wonderful. Thank you.
So it's about time for us to say thank you very much, Luc, for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you for your kindness and bonhomie, literally. And I'm at a loss for words. Thank you again, Luc. You've been extremely kind.
And thank you to you all, to the organizers, for putting up this wonderful seminar, and for the people whom I didn't see, because, I mean, we're just in this very strange world where we're talking in front of our computers. But that was really a pleasure to exchange with you. And thank you for all the questions that were raised, for the organizing of all that. And I hope to see some of you in Paris when we can still, I mean, live again, you know, travel again and discuss. And it's really a pity we haven't got a time for drinks now. Normally we should have meet around a drink. So anyway, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luc. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Foisneau.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.